At dinner, my mom rolled her eyes and said, "Honestly, you're the family's. I am Anita, 32, the family accountant who never signed up for the job. For years, I have been the financial backbone supporting my parents and sister through every crisis they created. Tonight at dinner, after suggesting my sister actually work for what she wants, my mother rolled her eyes and said those words I will never forget. Honestly, Anita, you are the family's biggest regret." I did not fight back. I simply stood up and left, finally seeing the years of emotional abuse clearly. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe to see how I finally stopped enabling the people who took me for granted. Growing up in our small suburban home in Michigan, I learned early that money was always a problem, but responsibility was somehow optional for everyone except me. From age 10, I was the one who understood the electricity might be shut off if bills went unpaid. While my friends had carefree childhoods, I was learning to budget my parents' meager income and helping them fill out payment plan forms. My mother worked sporadically as a receptionist, always quitting when the job became too stressful. My father jumped between part-time jobs, never keeping one long enough to advance. Meanwhile, I was the straight-A student who took advanced math and stayed up late calculating how to stretch groceries for another week. My sister Jasmine came along when I was 5. From the moment she arrived, the family dynamics were clear. She was the golden child, the one whose tears brought immediate attention, whose wishes were priorities, whose failures were always someone else's fault. When Jasmine wanted dance lessons we could not afford, my parents somehow found the money. When I needed a graphing calculator for AP calculus, I worked extra babysitting jobs to save up. "Anita is so responsible," my mother would tell relatives proudly, as if my maturity was a natural trait rather than a survival mechanism I developed in our chaotic household. "She just has such a good head on her shoulders." What she really meant was, Anita will handle it. Anita will figure it out. Anita will pick up our slack. By high school, I was effectively managing our household finances. I set up the payment schedules, reminded my parents of due dates, and often contributed my own earnings from after-school jobs. While Jasmine was allowed to focus on finding herself, I was focused on keeping our family afloat. College should have been my escape. I earned a full scholarship to the University of Michigan for accounting. My professors recognized my talent with numbers and my uncommon understanding of financial systems. For the first time, I felt proud of my abilities rather than burdened by them. But even 60 miles away at school, the phone calls never stopped. Dad needed $300 for an emergency car repair. Mom had forgotten to pay the insurance and needed $700 by tomorrow. Jasmine had overspent her allowance and needed just a little help this month. I worked 2 campus jobs while maintaining my GPA. Every dollar I did not spend on basic necessities went back home. My roommates went on spring break trips while I picked up extra tutoring shifts. They did not understand why I never joined them for weekend outings or ordered pizza on movie nights. "Why do you always say no to everything?" my roommate Caitlin asked once. "You work all the time, but you never seem to have any money." How could I explain that my earnings disappeared into the black hole of my family's financial irresponsibility? That I was the emergency fund, the safety net, the human ATM who could not say no. After graduation, I landed a position at a financial consulting firm in Detroit. The starting salary seemed enormous to me, $60,000 a year with benefits. For the first time, I thought I might be able to save for my own future while helping my family stabilize theirs. I tried to teach them. I really did. I created simple budgeting spreadsheets for my parents. I sat with my father to analyze their spending habits. I offered to help my mother find more consistent work. I even tried to give Jasmine basic financial literacy lessons when she started community college. Their reactions were always the same: eye-rolling, sighs, defensive anger. "We are not your clients, Anita," my mother snapped during one of these sessions. "Stop treating us like we are stupid." "I am just trying to help you become independent," I said. "We do not need financial independence lectures," my father replied. "We just need a little help until things turn around." But things never turned around because they never made different choices. My sister dropped out of community college after 3 semesters, claiming it was not the right fit. She moved back home at 22 with no degree, no job prospects, and a belief that these circumstances were due to bad luck rather than her choices. My apartment became the family solution center. When the refrigerator broke, I paid for repairs. When Dad needed dental work not covered by insurance, I covered the $4,000 bill. When Jasmine wanted to go to Cancun with friends for her 23rd birthday, somehow it became my responsibility to make her dream come true. "You have all this money and no one to spend it on," my mother said when I hesitated about the vacation funds. "What else are you saving for anyway?" What was I saving for? A home of my own that was not a rental. Retirement that would not leave me dependent on others. Perhaps even a family someday, one built on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation. The demands increased after my promotion last month. Senior financial analyst with a 20% raise. I should have been celebrating this achievement, the result of 3 years of 60-hour work weeks and additional certifications earned on weekends. Instead, my family saw it as an increase in their available resources. Dad started talking about a new truck. Mom mentioned kitchen renovations. Jasmine began sending me links to European vacations. Not one of them said congratulations. Not one asked about my increasing responsibilities at work or the stress of managing larger client portfolios. Not one recognized that my success was despite their constant drains on my resources, not an opportunity to drain more. The weight of their expectations was crushing me, but I did not know how to break the cycle. Every time I tried to establish boundaries, the emotional manipulation began. "After all we have done for you. We are family. This is what family does. You have always been so selfish." Was I selfish for wanting some of my own earnings, for dreaming of financial security for myself, for growing increasingly resentful of their entitlement to the money I worked so hard to earn? These questions haunted me in the weeks leading up to that fateful dinner, the night everything finally became crystal clear. I arrived at my parents' house that Friday evening after a 14-hour workday, carrying takeout from their favorite Italian restaurant and a bottle of wine I could not really afford. My shoulders ached from hunching over spreadsheets, and my eyes burned from staring at financial models on dual monitors. All I wanted was a quiet meal and early bedtime, but family dinner was a monthly obligation I could not avoid. The small brick house looked exactly as it had throughout my childhood, except now I was paying half their mortgage each month as an investment in the family home. The yard was unkempt, with Dad's half-finished projects scattered about. The garage door had been broken for months despite my giving them money for repairs. "There she is," my father called as I walked in, not getting up from his recliner where he watched baseball. "The big shot financial wizard." I forced a smile, setting down the heavy bags of food on the kitchen counter. Mom was on her phone scrolling through Facebook, barely looking up to acknowledge my arrival. "I brought dinner," I said, unpacking containers of pasta and salad. "From Salvatore's." "You are late," Mom noted, finally putting down her phone. "We have been starving." I bit back the retort that they could have made themselves something if they were hungry, or that perhaps the free meal I brought after my exhausting workday might warrant a thank you rather than criticism. Jasmine bounced in from her bedroom, her hair freshly dyed a bright purple. "Yay, food! I am starving." At least someone was excited, even if it was just about the free meal rather than seeing me. We settled around the dining table, the one I had also paid to replace last year, when the old one collapsed. The conversation flowed as it typically did, everyone talking about their problems, while showing minimal interest in my life. Dad complained about his boss at the hardware store where he worked 20 hours a week. Mom detailed her latest conflict with a neighbor over property lines. Jasmine dominated the conversation with stories about her friends' dramatic lives and the unfairness of the job market that prevented her from finding fulfilling work despite her lack of qualifications or consistent effort. I nodded and made appropriate noises of sympathy, too tired to do more. The food was good at least, and the wine helped dull the edge of my frustration. It was during dessert, the tiramisu I had splurged on, when the conversation shifted to the latest family crisis. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," Jasmine said, her voice rising with practiced distress. "Something awful happened yesterday." Everyone turned to her, concern immediately visible on my parents' faces. I braced myself for whatever drama was coming. "I was backing out of the driveway to go to my job interview," she began, already layering in the detail about a job interview I suspected had never actually occurred, when I hit the neighbor's mailbox. But then I panicked and accelerated instead of braking, and hit their tree too. "Oh no," Mom gasped. "Are you okay?" I am fine, Jasmine said, but my car is totaled. The insurance says it will cost more to fix than the car is worth. That old Honda was on its last legs anyway, Dad said sympathetically. I remained quiet, remembering that I had paid for half of that old Honda just 2 years ago with the promise that Jasmine would make monthly payments to me that never materialized. So, Jasmine continued, looking directly at me for the first time that evening. I need a new car. I found a perfect one at the dealership by the mall. It is a used Audi, only $30,000. The table fell silent as 3 pairs of eyes turned to me expectantly. $30,000, I repeated slowly. For your first car after an accident where you were at fault. It has really low mileage, Jasmine added quickly. And the dealer said my credit is not good enough for financing, so I would need a cosigner anyway. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Jasmine, I think you should look for something more practical. Maybe after you have been working steadily for a while, you could save for a down payment on a reliable, affordable car. Her face darkened. What do you mean, working steadily? I told you I had a job interview. Yes, and that is great. But maybe secure the job first. See if you like it. Start building your savings. I would be happy to help you look for something in the 5 to 8,000 range once you have some income. 5,000, she scoffed. That would get me a total beater. It would get you reliable transportation, I corrected gently, which is what you need right now. Mom put down her fork with a clatter. I cannot believe how stingy you have become, Anita. Your sister needs help. I have helped, I said quietly. I have helped all of you consistently for years. I am just suggesting that maybe it is time for Jasmine to take some financial responsibility. Financial responsibility, Dad repeated with a derisive snort. Listen to her talking like we are children. I am not talking to you like children. I insisted, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that came with these conversations. I am talking to you like adults who could make different choices. Different choices? Mom's voice rose. What is that supposed to mean? That we choose to struggle, that we choose to need help? Sometimes, yes, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. I think you have chosen patterns that keep you financially dependent, and I have enabled those patterns by always being the safety net. Jasmine pushed back from the table dramatically. I cannot believe you right now. My car is wrecked. I need to get to interviews, and you are giving me a lecture instead of helping. I am trying to help in a sustainable way, I explained. Getting you a luxury car you cannot afford is not helping. It is continuing a cycle that is not working for any of us. So what are you saying? Mom demanded. That you will not help your sister, that you will let her suffer because of your precious financial principles. I looked around at their angry, entitled faces, and something inside me finally broke. Years of suppressed resentment threatened to spill over, but I held it in, determined to remain calm. I am saying that I think it is time for all of us to reconsider this family dynamic. I cannot keep being the financial solution to every problem. It is not healthy for me, and honestly, it is not healthy for any of you either. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mother's face contorted with rage. She threw her napkin onto the table and rolled her eyes in that dismissive way that had diminished me since childhood. Honestly, Anita, she said, her voice dripping with contempt, you are the family's biggest regret. We raised you to care about family, but all you care about is your money. You sit there judging us while we struggle. You have always been cold and selfish, even as a child. Sometimes I wonder how you could possibly be my daughter. The words landed like physical blows. The family's biggest regret. After all I had sacrificed, all I had given, all the ways I had kept them afloat. I was their regret. Dad stared at his plate. Jasmine looked shocked, then quickly adopted an expression of righteous agreement with Mom. No one defended me. No one objected to this characterization of my entire existence as something they regretted. In that moment, everything became startlingly clear. I saw the pattern that had defined my entire life, the role I had played, the exploitation disguised as family obligation. I saw how I had participated in my own diminishment by accepting their narrative that my purpose was to serve their needs while receiving nothing but criticism in return. I could have screamed. I could have recited the ledger of financial support I had provided over the years. I could have thrown their ingratitude in their faces and detailed every sacrifice I had made. Instead, I quietly placed my napkin on the table, stood up, and picked up my purse. "Where are you going?" Mom demanded. "We are not finished here." "I am," I said simply. "Thank you for dinner." "You brought dinner," Dad pointed out. "Yes," I agreed. I did. And then I walked out, closing the door gently behind me, my heart pounding, but my mind suddenly unexpectedly clear. As I drove home through the darkening evening, tears streamed down my face. But they were not only tears of hurt, they were tears of release. For the first time, I saw the truth without the filter of obligation and guilt. I was not the family's regret. I was the family's ATM. And ATMs do not have feelings, dreams, or needs. They simply dispense cash on demand. Well, this ATM was officially closed for business. I just did not know yet exactly what that would mean. The weekend after walking out of my parents' house passed in a blur of emotion and clarity. I alternated between sobbing on my couch and making meticulous lists in the financial planning notebook I usually reserved for clients. By Sunday evening, I had ignored 27 text messages, 12 voicemails, and numerous social media messages from my family. They ranged from my mother's angry, "I cannot believe you would disrespect me like this," to Jasmine's plaintive, "I really need that car by Wednesday," to my father's brief, "Call your mother." Not one message contained an apology. Not one acknowledged that calling me their biggest regret might have been hurtful. Not one showed any recognition that perhaps their constant financial demands were unreasonable. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Then I made an emergency appointment with Dr. Landon, the therapist I had been seeing sporadically when family stress became overwhelming. "I need to make a change," I told her after recounting the dinner disaster. "I cannot keep doing this." Dr. Landon nodded thoughtfully. "What you are describing, Anita, is financial abuse. Your family has been exploiting you, and when you try to establish reasonable boundaries, they use emotional manipulation to maintain control." Financial abuse. The term hit me like a revelation. I had always thought of myself as simply being generous, being the responsible one, being a good daughter and sister. I had never considered that my family's behavior had crossed into abuse. "But they are not physically hurting me," I said weakly. "They just need help sometimes." "Abuse is not always physical," she reminded me. "And from what you have described, this is not occasional help. This is systematic exploitation that has negatively impacted your financial security, your emotional well-being, and your ability to build a life of your own." We talked for nearly 2 hours, well beyond our scheduled time. Dr. Landon helped me see patterns I had normalized, the ways I had been conditioned to put my family's wants above my own basic needs, how my identity had become wrapped up in being their financial savior. "What do I do now?" I asked finally. "That depends on what you want," she said. "But whatever you decide, it needs to prioritize your well-being for once." That evening, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet I should have made years ago. I meticulously documented every loan I had provided to my family members over the past decade. Car payments, mortgage assistance, medical bills, vacation funds, educational expenses, furniture, appliances, utility bills. The list went on for pages. The total made me physically ill, $87, $342.56. $87,000 that would never be repaid. $87,000 that could have been my house down payment, my retirement security, my freedom. And what had I received in return? Criticism, entitlement, the distinction of being the family's biggest regret. The clarity that came with seeing that number was transformative. I made a decision then that was both terrifying and liberating. I would stop all financial support immediately. Cold turkey. No transition period, no warnings, no negotiations. Over the next 2 days, I systematically dismantled the financial ties that bound me to my family. I removed myself as the authorized payment source on their utility accounts. I called the mortgage company and canceled the automatic monthly transfer from my account to theirs. I closed the joint checking account I had established with my father for emergencies. I called the cell phone company and removed myself as the responsible party on our family plan. I gathered all documentation showing my name on any of their financial obligations. The most difficult decision concerned my father's truck. Technically, I was the owner and had been making the payments for the past year. After much deliberation, I made the final payment to own it outright, then contacted the lender to arrange repossession since it was primarily used by my father despite being in my name. You can give him the option to refinance it in his own name, the agent suggested. He won't qualify, I said, knowing my father's credit score was abysmal. Then repossession is your right as the legal owner, she confirmed. Each action was difficult, but each also loosened the knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for years. For the first time, I was prioritizing my financial health over their financial wants. The last step was the hardest. I blocked their numbers on my phone. Not permanently, I told myself, but just for a few weeks while I regained my emotional equilibrium. I needed space to strengthen my resolve without their practiced manipulations. That night, I sat in my quiet apartment feeling lighter than I had in years, despite the waves of guilt that occasionally washed over me. I reminded myself that I had not created this situation. I had simply enabled it, and now I was choosing to stop. My therapist had recommended a mantra to repeat when the guilt became overwhelming. I am not responsible for financial problems I did not create. I am allowed to prioritize my own well-being. I whispered it to myself as I fell asleep, phone blessedly silent for the first time in years. The initial silence was both unnerving and peaceful. For the first week after implementing my financial separation plan, I kept expecting my apartment door to burst open with angry family members demanding explanations. I jumped each time the phone rang at work, half expecting to hear my mother's accusatory voice when I answered. But the direct confrontation I feared did not come immediately. Instead, it began as a trickle of messages that quickly became a flood. By the beginning of the second week, I had unblocked their numbers, feeling strong enough to at least see their reactions without immediately capitulating. What I found was a predictable progression through tactics that had always worked on me before. First came anger. "I cannot believe you would do this to your own family," my mother texted. "After all we have done for you." Then came the accusations. "You think you are so much better than us," Jasmine wrote. "You have always been stuck up and selfish." When those did not elicit the desired response, they moved to health concerns. "Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of this stress," Mom claimed. "If anything happens to him, it will be on your conscience." Next came the financial panic. "The mortgage payment bounced," Dad texted. "They are threatening foreclosure if we do not pay the late fees." And finally, inevitably, came the emotional manipulation that had always been their most effective tool. "I don't know where we went wrong with you," Mom wrote. "Family is supposed to take care of each other. I guess we failed as parents if you can abandon us so easily." Each message was designed to make me question my decision to trigger the responsibility and guilt that had always made me open my wallet in the past. But something had fundamentally changed inside me. I could see their tactics clearly now, recognized them for the manipulation they were. I did not respond to any of the messages, instead forwarding them to Dr. Landon, who had offered to help me process the fallout. "Classic escalation," she noted. "Stay strong. This is the extinction burst before they realize the old patterns will not work anymore." By the third week, the messages grew more desperate and frequent. Jasmine was particularly persistent, her texts evolving from angry to pleading. "I had to cancel 3 job interviews because I have no car," she complained. Then hours later, "Can we just talk about this? I promise I will get a job and pay you back this time." The hardest moment came when my mother left a voicemail that for the first time contained something close to an apology. "I should not have said that thing about you being our regret," she admitted. "I was just upset. You know I did not mean it. Please call us sweetheart. We need you." My finger hovered over the callback button. The longing to believe her to return to the familiar role of family savior was almost overwhelming. I played the message for Dr. Landon during our next session. "What do you hear in this message?" she asked me. "An apology," I said. "Maybe they are really sorry." "Listen again," she suggested. "Is she sorry for years of financial exploitation, for treating you like an ATM rather than a daughter? Or is she just sorry she said the quiet part out loud during that dinner?" I played it again and heard what my therapist already recognized. This was not accountability. It was just another tactic to regain access to my financial support. The true breaking point came at the beginning of the fourth week. I was in an important client meeting when my administrative assistant slipped me a note. "Your family is in the lobby. They seem upset and refuse to leave until they see you." My heart pounded as I excused myself from the meeting. In the lobby stood my mother, father, and sister looking disheveled and angry. My sister spotted me first. "There she is!" Jasmine shouted, causing heads to turn throughout the professional office space. "The daughter who abandons her family." I approached them calmly, acutely aware of my colleagues watching. "This is my workplace," I said quietly. "We cannot do this here." "We would not have to come to your precious workplace if you would answer your phone," my mother hissed. "You have left us in an impossible situation." "I cannot discuss this here," I repeated. "Please leave before security is called." "You would call security on your own family?" my father asked incredulously. "I would not have to if you respected basic boundaries," I replied, my voice shaking slightly, but my resolve firm. What I did not expect was the intervention of my boss Martin, who had apparently witnessed the commotion. He stepped forward, his presence authoritative but calm. "Is everything all right, Anita?" he asked. "Just a family matter," I said, embarrassed that my personal problems had spilled into my professional space. "A family matter," my mother scoffed. "She has cut us off completely. No warning, no discussion. The mortgage payment bounced, the utilities are getting shut off, and she just does not care." Martin looked at me, then back at my family, his expression unreadable. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson," he said formally, "Anita is one of our most valued team members. Whatever personal matters exist between you should be handled privately, not in our corporate offices. I must ask you to leave now, or I will have to call building security." "You do not understand," Jasmine protested. "She owes us—" "Actually," Martin said calmly, "from what I am hearing, it sounds like you might owe her quite a bit. Now please leave before this becomes more uncomfortable for everyone." To my astonishment, my family backed down in the face of Martin's firm boundary. As they were escorted out by the receptionist, my mother turned back to deliver a parting shot. "This is not over, Anita. Family does not just walk away from family." After they left, Martin surprised me again. Instead of reprimanding me for the disruption, he invited me into his office. "I have noticed you seem stressed lately," he said once we were seated. "If you need some personal time to sort things out, the company supports you. Your work has been exemplary, and sometimes family issues require our full attention." Tears welled in my eyes at this unexpected kindness and understanding. "Thank you," I managed. "I might take a few days." "Take what you need," he said. "And Anita, whatever is happening, remember that you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." His words stayed with me as I took advantage of his offer, using 3 personal days to recover from the confrontation and strengthen my boundaries. For the first time, I was seeing my family's behavior through other people's eyes, and the perspective was illuminating. What I had normalized as family obligation, others clearly saw as exploitation. It was exactly 1 month after the disastrous dinner when the consequences of my decision fully manifested in my family's life. I had maintained my distance, focusing on my own healing and financial recalibration. The emotional space had given me clarity I had never experienced before. My phone rang on a Tuesday evening as I was preparing a simple dinner for myself. Jasmine's name flashed on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered, ready to calmly restate my boundaries if necessary. I was not prepared for the hysterical screaming that greeted me. "Why did they tow Dad's truck? Why is the electricity shut off? What have you done to us?" Jasmine shrieked, her voice so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Good evening to you too, Jasmine," I said calmly when she paused to breathe. "Do not give me that. Everything is falling apart here. The water is going to be shut off next. Mom is having anxiety attacks. Dad cannot get to work without his truck, and it is all your fault." I took a deep breath. It is not my fault. These are the natural consequences of financial decisions that have been made over many years. "We do not have money for all these bills," she yelled. "You know that you have always helped us. And now I am not," I said simply. which means you all need to find other solutions. What solutions? Get the truck back. Turn the electricity back on. You cannot just leave us like this. I felt a strange sense of peace as I composed my response. After a moment, I did not speak it, but rather texted it while she continued to rant on the phone. Regrets don't keep the lights on. There was a moment of stunned silence as she presumably read my text. Then the explosion of profanity was so intense that I simply ended the call. Over the next few days, I received reports of the growing chaos at my parents' home from neighbors I had always been friendly with. Mrs. Tompkins from next door called to ask if everything was all right, as she had noticed the power was out, and there seemed to be a lot of shouting. Mr. Diaz from across the street mentioned that my father had asked to borrow his car for work. I was polite but vague in my responses, not wanting to air family business, but also not willing to rush in and fix everything as I always had before. A week after Jasmine's frantic call, I was surprised to receive a call from my Aunt Fiona, my mother's older sister who lived in Florida. Fiona and I had always been cordial but not particularly close. "Anita," she said when I answered, "what on earth is happening with your parents? Your mother called asking for $3,000 to avoid foreclosure on the house. She says you have abandoned the family completely." I sighed, bracing myself to be judged and criticized by yet another family member. "It is complicated, Aunt Fiona." "I expect it is," she replied, surprising me with her neutral tone. "Your mother's explanation did not quite add up. She mentioned years of you helping them financially, then suddenly cutting them off without warning. That did not sound like the responsible niece I know. I thought I should get your side before making any decisions." For the first time, someone was actually asking for my perspective. The relief was so profound that I found myself pouring out the whole story from my childhood as the family financial manager through the biggest regret comment and my decision to stop enabling their financial irresponsibility. Instead of the judgment I expected, Aunt Fiona was quiet for a moment, then said something that brought tears to my eyes. "I had no idea, Anita. None of us in the extended family knew you were carrying this burden. Your mother always said you were doing well and happy to help them occasionally. I never imagined the extent of what they were asking from you." "I did help willingly for a long time," I admitted. "But it became clear they saw me as an endless resource rather than a daughter with my own needs and dreams." "No parent should depend on their child this way," Aunt Fiona said firmly. "I will not be sending money. In fact, I will be calling my sister to have a very direct conversation about this situation." As it turned out, my mother had been reaching out to various family members seeking loans to cover the suddenly overwhelming bills. In each case, she had portrayed me as the villain who had cruelly abandoned them in their time of need. But as each relative called me to verify her claims, they heard my side of the story complete with the staggering amount I had already contributed over the years. Not one of them sent money. Several thanked me for my honesty and expressed concern about my well-being rather than my parents' financial situation. About 3 weeks after the utilities began shutting off, I heard from a former high school classmate who worked at the hardware store with my father that Dad had requested full-time hours for the first time in 5 years. The manager had been so shocked, he immediately approved the change. A week later, Mrs. Tompkins reported that the electricity was back on next door. She also mentioned seeing Jasmine leaving the house early each morning in a uniform from the local diner. I watched from a distance as my family began to face reality without me as their financial safety net. The transition was clearly difficult for them, but not impossible. They were finding ways to survive that did not involve my bank account. Part of me felt guilty for their struggles, but a stronger part recognized this was a necessary correction in our unhealthy dynamic. Sometimes love means allowing people to experience the consequences of their own choices. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop protecting others from reality. I watched them navigate their self-created mess with a mix of sadness and satisfaction. The family patterns of decades were being forcibly rewired, and while the process was painful, it was also necessary. 3 months after I walked away from my parents' dinner table, my Aunt Fiona called with an unexpected proposal. "I am coming to Michigan next weekend," she said. "I have been talking with your parents and Jasmine regularly, and I think it is time for a family meeting. Would you be willing to participate if I moderate?" My initial instinct was to refuse. I had found peace in the distance I had created. My finances were finally my own. My anxiety had decreased significantly. I was even beginning to date again, something I had never had time or energy for when constantly managing family crises. But Dr. Landon encouraged me to consider it. "You have established healthy boundaries," she pointed out. "This might be an opportunity to communicate those boundaries clearly with support present, rather than simply maintaining distance indefinitely." So I agreed with conditions the meeting would be at Aunt Fiona's hotel neutral territory rather than the emotionally loaded space of my parents' home, and I would leave immediately if the conversation devolved into accusations or manipulation. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully in clothes that made me feel confident and strong. A navy blue dress and blazer I typically wore for important client presentations. I drove to the hotel with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, rehearsing the points I wanted to make and the boundaries I needed to establish. Aunt Fiona met me in the lobby, embracing me warmly. "I am proud of you," she whispered. "This took courage." She led me to a small conference room she had booked for the occasion. My parents and Jasmine were already seated at the table, looking uncomfortable and slightly resentful. Mom had lost weight, her face more drawn than I remembered. Dad seemed to have aged years in just 3 months. Jasmine's previously manicured nails were short and practical, now her expensive highlights grown out to reveal her natural brown hair. "Thank you all for coming," Aunt Fiona began formally. "We are here to have an honest conversation about family dynamics and financial responsibilities. Everyone will have a chance to speak without interruption. I expect respect from all parties regardless of how difficult the conversation becomes." The awkward silence that followed was excruciating. No one seemed to know how to begin. Finally, Aunt Fiona turned to me. "Anita, would you like to start by explaining your perspective on what led to this situation?" I took a deep breath and unfolded the notes I had prepared with Dr. Landon's help. "For as long as I can remember," I began, "I have been the financial problem solver in this family. At first, it was just helping with budgeting and planning. Then it became contributing my own money occasionally. Eventually, it evolved into an expectation that I would cover any shortfall pay for any emergency fund, any want that could not be afforded otherwise." My father shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent as I continued. "Over the past 10 years, I have contributed over $87,000 to this family's expenses. Money that was never repaid, rarely acknowledged, and eventually simply expected. Money that could have been my house down payment, my retirement security, my future." I made myself look directly at each of them as I spoke. "I did this willingly at first because I love you and wanted to help. But over time, I realized I was not helping. I was enabling financial irresponsibility. I was participating in a dynamic where my role was to sacrifice my financial security for choices I had no part in making." "That is not fair," my mother interjected. "We had hard times." "Everyone has hard times," Aunt Fiona reminded her gently. "Please let Anita finish." I continued, my voice growing stronger. "The breaking point came at dinner 3 months ago when, after years of support, years of giving until it hurt, I was told I was the family's biggest regret for suggesting that Jasmine take some financial responsibility instead of expecting me to buy her a luxury car." Jasmine looked down at the table, her cheeks flushing. "That comment revealed how you truly see me," I said, emotion finally breaking through my careful composure. "Not as a daughter or sister who has given everything to support this family, not as a person with my own needs and dreams, but as a resource who had the audacity to suggest limits, a disappointment for not emptying my bank account one more time." Tears slid down my face, but I did not wipe them away. "Do you have any idea how much that hurt? Do you understand what it feels like to realize the people you love most see your entire existence as a regret because you finally suggested a boundary?" The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions. My mother's face showed conflict between defensiveness and something that might have been shame. My father studied his hands, unwilling to meet my eyes. "I did not cut you off to be cruel," I continued more softly. "I did it because both you and I needed to break this unhealthy pattern. You needed to find ways to support yourselves rather than depending on me." and I needed to start prioritizing my own financial and emotional well-being after years of placing it last. When I finished, the room was completely still. Then, to everyone's surprise, my father was the first to respond. "I failed you," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. "I failed as a provider, and then I failed as a father by taking from you instead of giving. I do not know when or how I became this person who would take money from his own daughter rather than working more hours or finding better jobs. But that is what happened, and I am deeply ashamed." My mother's reaction was less direct. "You make it sound like we just used you," she said defensively. "We raised you, fed you, clothed you." "That is what parents are supposed to do, Catherine," Aunt Fiona interjected. "It is the basic job description of being a parent. It does not create a lifetime financial debt that your child must repay." "You have always been so perfect," Mom continued, addressing me directly now. "Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect finances. Do you know what that is like for a mother? To know your daughter is judging you constantly, always doing better than you ever could." I stared at her in disbelief. "You were jealous of me, of your own daughter." "Not jealous exactly," she said, but her expression told a different story. "Just resentful sometimes. You make everything look so easy." "Easy?" I repeated incredulously. "I worked 2 jobs through college while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I work 60-hour weeks. I skipped vacations and gave up dating and ignored my own needs for years to keep supporting this family. None of that was easy." "I didn't realize," she said quietly. "You never asked," I replied. Jasmine had been uncharacteristically silent throughout this exchange. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. "I thought that is just what you wanted to do," she said. "Help us, I mean. You always seemed so together, so capable. It never occurred to me that you might be sacrificing things you wanted for yourself." "That is because you never had to sacrifice anything," I pointed out. "You were always given what you wanted either by Mom and Dad or by me when they could not manage it." She nodded slowly. "The past month has been a wake-up call. I have been working at the diner and it is hard. My feet hurt every night. Customers can be awful. But I am paying my own phone bill now for the first time ever, and it actually feels good somehow." This small admission touched me more deeply than I expected. It was the first acknowledgement from any of them that the changes I had forced might actually have positive aspects. The conversation continued for hours, moving through accusations and defensiveness to moments of painful honesty. There were tears on all sides, some bitter words, some hesitant apologies. It was messy and uncomfortable and necessary. No miraculous healing occurred that day. My mother never fully acknowledged her role in the dysfunction or offered a complete apology for the biggest regret comment. My father's shame seemed genuine, but did not erase years of financial dependence. Jasmine's new perspective was still in its infancy. But something had shifted. For the first time, I had spoken my truth without minimizing it to protect their feelings. For the first time, they had been forced to see me not just as a resource, but as a person harmed by our family dynamic. As we prepared to leave, Aunt Fiona pulled me aside. "This is just the beginning," she said. "Real change takes time, but you have broken the cycle, and that is enormously brave." I drove home feeling emotionally drained, but also lighter somehow. I had been seen and heard, perhaps not completely, but more than ever before. It was a start. 6 months after I stopped paying my family's bills, my life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The most immediate change was financial. Without the constant drain of family emergencies, I had been able to build a proper emergency fund of my own and make significant contributions to my retirement accounts. I had also started seeing a financial therapist in addition to Dr. Landon, someone who specialized in helping people heal their relationship with money after financial trauma. She helped me recognize that my hypervigilance about finances, while it had served me well professionally, was also a trauma response to my unstable childhood. "You deserve to occasionally spend money on joy, not just security," she reminded me often. Taking her advice, I booked my first real vacation in years, a week-long trip to the Pacific Northwest, where I hiked through ancient forests and watched sunsets over the ocean. I bought art for my apartment walls, replaced my worn furniture with pieces I truly loved, and even splurged on cooking classes, discovering a passion for creating meals that nourished both body and soul. Dating entered my life again cautiously at first. I met Daniel, a civil engineer with a quiet humor and thoughtful nature, at one of those cooking classes. Our relationship developed slowly, both of us careful with our hearts, but the connection was genuine and nourishing rather than depleting. "You light up when you talk about your job," he observed during one of our early dinners. "You really love what you do, don't you?" "I do," I admitted. "I love helping clients understand their finances and plan for their future. I just needed to learn to do the same for myself." My professional life flourished without the constant stress of family financial crises interrupting my workday. I was recently selected to head a new division focused on financial planning for women, an opportunity that would not have been possible if I were still spending significant mental and emotional energy managing my family's chaos. The transformation in my family was more complex and less linear. After our facilitated meeting with Aunt Fiona, there was another month of minimal contact as everyone processed the difficult truths that had been spoken. My father was the first to reach out, asking if we could meet for coffee. At a small cafe halfway between our homes, he spoke with a humility I had never seen in him before. "I have been working full-time for 3 months now," he told me. "First time in 15 years I have worked 40 hours a week consistently." "How does it feel?" I asked. "Exhausting," he admitted with a rueful smile. "But also right somehow, like I am finally doing what I should have been doing all along." He slid an envelope across the table. Inside was $300 in cash. "What is this?" I asked. "The first payment," he said. "I know I can never fully repay what you have given us over the years, but I can start showing you that I am taking responsibility now." I was so moved I could barely speak. It was not about the money, which was a tiny fraction of what I had provided over the years. It was about the acknowledgement, the concrete action showing a commitment to change. My mother's evolution was less straightforward. She still struggled to fully acknowledge how her behavior had affected me, defaulting often to "but we are family" justifications. But there were small signs of growth. She had taken a part-time job at a local florist, using her eye for color and design in a constructive way. She no longer called me with financial emergencies, though I suspected this was more because Aunt Fiona had made it clear she would help them navigate any true emergencies if they exhausted all other options first. Jasmine surprised me the most. After 3 months at the diner, she had been promoted to shift supervisor. She enrolled in community college again, this time with a clear focus on hospitality management. "I realized I am actually good with people," she told me during one of our tentative sister lunches. "And I like the structure of restaurant work, knowing exactly what needs to be done and when." She had also moved into a small apartment with a roommate, her first time living independently. When I visited, I was touched to see a framed photo of the two of us as children on her bookshelf. "I was awful to you," she acknowledged as she caught me looking at it. "I just did not see it then. I thought that is just how siblings were. You had money, so of course you would share it." "And now?" I asked. "Now I understand that money represents choices, freedom, security. It is not just numbers on a paper. It is the result of work and sacrifice. I see that more clearly now that I am earning my own." The most meaningful family moment came during a small dinner at my apartment 6 months after the breaking point. I had invited my parents and Jasmine along with Aunt Fiona, who was visiting again. I cooked using skills from my classes, nothing elaborate but made with care. As we sat around my table, my mother raised her glass. "To Anita," she said, her voice unusually soft, "who has more value than we recognized." It was not a direct apology for calling me their biggest regret. It was not an acknowledgement of the full extent of the financial and emotional exploitation. But coming from my mother, who struggled deeply with admitting fault, it was significant. The path forward with my family remains a work in progress. We are learning new ways to relate to each other that do not revolve around money. We are discovering how to be family without the toxic dynamics that defined us for so long. I still maintain firm financial boundaries. I do not pay their bills or solve their money problems, but I have found ways to be generous that do not enable dysfunction. I gave Jasmine a laptop for school, but only after she completed her first semester with good grades. I helped my parents find a financial counselor who works with seniors on fixed incomes. I occasionally treat everyone to dinner, but no longer feel obligated to do so. What I learned through this painful journey is that sometimes love requires letting go. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for those you care about is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. I also learned that I matter. My financial security matters. My dreams and goals matter. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is necessary for healthy relationships. The irony is that by refusing to be the family ATM any longer, I actually helped my family grow. My father found pride in providing for himself again. My sister discovered capabilities she never knew she had. Even my mother, in her limited way, found purpose beyond financial dependence. Sometimes being called the family's biggest regret is actually a gift of clarity. It shows you exactly how you are viewed, stripping away the comfortable illusions that keep you trapped in unhealthy patterns. Sometimes the most painful words are the ones that finally set you free. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? Do you struggle with being the responsible one who everyone turns to for help? Has someone ever said something to you that hurt deeply, but ultimately led to positive change? Share your experiences in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, you deserve to prioritize your own well-being, and sometimes the strongest act of love is saying no. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to create healthy boundaries in your own life.